What's up, Smite fans? Wraithyn here, and I am back with another how-to guide. This time we are taking a look back in the jungle with one of my favorite gods of all time, the Greek hand of death, Thanatos. As I mentioned last time, I'm super new to doing these god guides, so be sure to comment below with any feedback. Also, I'm testing out this pesky new editor, so let me know how he's doing, if I should just, get rid of him. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. It definitely helps me out a ton, and I'd love to see YouTube grow as a place where I can teach people. I'm also live pretty much every night over on my Twitch channel as well, if you prefer live Q&A or coaching or anything like that. Hey, what's up, Rule? Guys, Rule is the new channel editor for YouTube.
Oh, me?
Oh, dude, Rule! Should we preview the Ravana video tonight? Thanatos has always been considered one of the best early game assassins in all of Smite. His ability to self-heal, chase targets, and gas pedal kills make him the ultimate pub stomping monster. Thanatos is ability based, but he's the first god that we're going to talk about that takes advantage of a very interesting mechanic. It's called auto attack canceling. AA cancels, auto attack canceling, or weaving in a lot of other games is when you quickly reset the auto attack chain with an ability allowing you to get off several auto attacks in a combo between abilities. You kind of weave them in between the individual abilities, and this can lead to a nearly 2x damage output if done correctly. Thanatos joins the ranks of gods like Susanoo, Thor, Daji, Hun, Bats, Nemesis, and more that really take advantage of this mechanic with fantastic results. As for how Thanatos plays, in Conquest specifically, he's an amazing early game get out in front bully that is absolutely terrifying to run into in the jungle alone. He can then transition into a bit of an ult bot, execute bot, or cleanup crew during late game team fights, but his strength is really in the early game. You can always tell who a good Thanatos is because they're usually never afraid to fight early, and then by the time the late game rolls around, they change up the way they play, and they're very tactical about how they pick and choose their entry into team fights. Okay, time to get right into the abilities. We'll start with the passive. It's a bit of an overwhelming ability, but put simply, if somebody is in your execute threshold, you can see them on the map no matter where they are, and you'll restore 20% of the enemy's total HP if you kill them. This is really nice when you kill an HP heavy tank. This will also give you 10% of a minion HP if you kill it, and the understated and possibly most important part of his entire passive is that his abilities cost HP and mana to use. May not seem like a lot, but this is one of the traits that makes Thanatos amazing for beginner junglers. You don't have to manage his mana. You can pretty much use all three abilities on every single camp for the entire game, and you won't have too much of a problem with mana, whereas in other junglers, you're constantly chugging mana pots or heading back to the fountain. Thana lets you focus on building an early lead and playing the map versus micromanaging your abilities for clear. Lastly, with this passive, if you do manage to get the killing blow on gods, it will take 5 seconds. That is right, 5 seconds off of any abilities that are currently on cooldown, including your ultimate. I don't even know if that's true. I would check that one. First up for the actual abilities is Death Sight. This is Thanatos' primary source of damage and basically the best thing about his entire kit. The base damage is really good. The scaling is okay at 60%, but the bonus damage of 10% of a god's max HP makes this thing chunk. It does not matter who you hit. Everyone feels it when this ability connects, and it'll heal you for 75% of the damage that you do. It's insane. This ability is great for turnaround kills, so don't be afraid to fight if it's up, even if you're low. Also of note, there's actually a weird bug with Thanatos where you won't get the 5-second cooldown reduction on his one if you fire it point blank to get the kill when you're close to the target. For some reason, the game registers the kill before the ability goes on cooldown or something, but realistically, you should have enough cooldown built that it really doesn't matter too much. Also, don't be afraid to just throw the scythe for poke just to try and get some damage off, especially if you're just in the mid 2v2 with your mid laner. If you connect with this at rank 3 to 5 in the early game and you half health a mid laner or a jungler, it immediately opens up map pressure in the middle of the map for you to invade and take what you want. That ability is going to come off cooldown any second, and you're going to be able to take the rest of their HP and take the camps at the same time. If you clear the mid wave and you're on your way to a camp, just chuck a scythe at the mid laner just for fun. See what happens. All right, next up is Thanatos 2, Scent of Death. This ability makes Thanatos slow immune, very important. Gives him between 15 and 35 flat penetration and a 10 to 30% movement speed buff. On top of this, if somebody is within your execute threshold, it will give you an additional 10 to 30% movement speed if you're facing towards the target that's in execute range. When this thing is maxed out, and someone is low, you are flying around the map at Mach 5.
Welcome to the rice field, motherfucker.
Once again, this ability costs very little mana and 5% of Thanatos' health, which you get back pretty quickly when you're clearing camps. I almost never even notice the health drop, but this ability is awesome for doing basically true damage to squishies and allowing you to rotate around the map quickly. Thanatos' third ability is Soul Reap. It's essentially a big giant cone AoE silence that does a good bit of damage. Not nearly as powerful as the one. The utility of the silence is a huge benefit, especially later when we're going to talk about how to gank and combo people. Lastly, the ultimate, and in my opinion the coolest part of Thanatos' kit, Hovering Death. Basically, Thanatos will charge up, fly into the sky for 5 seconds. He gains 150% bonus movement speed, so he is moving. And it lets him dive and stun targets below, dealing damage to them as well. Anyone in the execute threshold, which scales anywhere from 24 to 40% of their HP, will be killed instantly. Now for the crazy part. In the early and mid game, this ability isn't useful as an execute at all. If anything, it just tells the other team you're in the air and about to land on them, meaning they can time their abilities and their actives for when you're about to land. Good players will turn on you and blow you up the second you come down. That said, it's an incredibly useful gank tool because most of the time you can come from a direction that the enemy isn't expecting, land on their heads, and get your whole kit off. Next up is the leveling order, and as usual, there are two schools of thought on this one. I typically max the 1, the ult whenever possible to lift that threshold, then the 2, and then the 3. I personally prefer to favor the movement speed and flat pen of the 2 over the 3, as it allows me to power rotate my way around the map,
Oh, shit.
farm up as much as I want, and with just a mace or 2, I can pretty much guarantee that I'm doing true damage to the squishy targets throughout the entire game. That being said, some people do favor maxing the 3 over the 2 early, favoring the ability damage, which is also perfectly fine to do. I personally like to farm leads in the jungle and never really feel like I'm missing out on the damage of the 3. Try it out, do what feels best to you. I like the 2 because I favor the movement speed. All of these abilities should also be on instant cast because you need speed to get out the damage before the enemy can react. If you're not used to instant casting these abilities, it's again a giant cone AoE and a straight line Thanatos scythe, so change them up now. If you're on console, just go to the menu screen and then go to abilities, and you can change them individually from there. On PC, all you have to do is hit the K button and you can select each individual ability right there with your mouse. All right, on to the fun stuff. Let's talk about how to gank. This one is a little bit more interesting with Thanatos, as there are lots of ways to pull off a gank. It's all going to be situational depending on the god that you're fighting, what abilities and actives you had up, and what they have up. Typically, if I'm just rolling up on somebody, I'll just blink or flank them, and then I'll 3 them to silence them, auto for a little extra damage, and the Hydra's proc, 1 auto, and then use my 2 to chase them down. If they get really out of range for some reason, I'll typically ult to chase them, but not just to chase them. This actually also gives my abilities a chance to come off cooldown so I can confirm the kill when I land. Sometimes you'll go to ult them, they won't be in the execute threshold, or they'll Aegis, and you want your 3 for the silence and your 1 for the kill up when that happens. Sometimes the ult is just a good pause to reset for more kills instead of an execute tool. Now we're talking about ganking a lane, particularly solo. It can be a bit different. It's usually leveraging the ult. My advice would be, don't wait until they're in threshold to ult, especially if they're a squishy. If a mid laner has no beads and they're below 60 to 70% HP, you are going to kill them with your full auto attack cancel combo. You don't need to execute them. Just get up in the air. Try doing this from a good distance away and try not to fly over common ward locations so they can't hear or see you. Solo lane is a bit of a different story. These gods are tanky, and the laning phase tends to be a 15-minute slap fest, especially if the gods have good sustain. The good news here is that they are used to fighting each other. Typically here, I am going for an execute on a solo laner, but I'll need a little help from my solo laner to do it. Usually I'll let them know well ahead of time that I'm coming, and that they should beat up the other solo laner as much as possible as I start my route to them. The important part here is pre-ulting the execute. Ideally, you want to ult early when they're at 50% HP or 60% HP. Call the attack, and if done right, the enemy solo laner should just about be in the execute range by the time your targeter hits them. Free execute. If not, that's fine. The usual combo where you land on them will work. Speaking of combos, the usual combo that will work is Thanatos' full combo out of the ultimate. It's very simple. You ult, land, auto, 1, auto, 3, and then 2 to chase. The reason we lead with the 1 here, and I see a lot of Thanatoses lead with the silence, is you're taking advantage of that stun to confirm the damage from your 1. So there's plenty of time for you to land, auto, 1 while they're stunned, auto again, and then the 3 is actually used to prevent the dash, the leap, the Aegis. And as always, if they're low, the 2 is going to be great for you to chase them down. I mentioned it before, but during late game team fights, ulting in as Thanatos is a good way to get exploded when you land. You really need to be tactical about how you engage, similar to ganking the solo lane. I will typically wait for a fight to pop off, see if a tank gets low, and if not, I'll try and land on one of the carries and unload some damage. Coordinate with your solo laner or if your support is diving, but ideally you want to be landing 3 to 5 seconds after the fight pops off. That's when ults come out, that's when abilities come out, that's when actives are down. You can actually join these fights even earlier using your stun to set up a big mage ult like a raw ult, or even later when everyone's low and you're there to clean up. Each game will be different, each team fight will be different, so play around with these. Figure out what the best way to engage is depending on your team comp and how your team is playing. That being said, you may want some defense if you're going to be the one diving in first. Moving right into builds, but with a small disclaimer, this guide will be useful for his kit unless he gets reworked, but this build is as of September 2020, so itemization may change drastically by the time you watch this. Some of these items may not even be in the game anymore. There's lots of good sites out there, particularly smitesource.com, that are up to date on the latest meta builds. But like any good player, you need to try and stay up to date on what to build, whether it's Thanatos or any other god. Once again, this is my favorite current build, and there are plenty of ways to build Thanatos, so don't feel boxed in by one thing or another. Typically here, I'll go the tier 1 mace start and then right into boots, the warrior tabby, and Jotuns. I feel like I have to explain myself on Jotuns constantly. Jotuns means more use of your 2 to speed around the map and farm, more ults, more abilities, and it really allows you to press an early lead really well. Some people like going Crusher here. I prefer the Jotuns.
Get the hell out! Get out! Get out! Get out!
Next up is either Brawlers if the enemy team has a ton of healing, or Hydra's Lament to maximize the damage from the auto attack cancel. Honestly, at this point in the game, 3 items in, healing typically doesn't feel super oppressive, and Thanatos will usually kill the target before healing comes through, so I tend to opt for the Hydras first and fit a Brawlers in somewhere afterwards. Next up is Erendite for the chase potential, power, and passive. This also gives you another 10% cooldown, which means you're max cooldown by 4 items in, which means you are ulting and speeding all over the place. Again, we want to push that early lead. After that is the big expensive item Heartseeker, the bonus damage, the pen. It's a great item to keep that gas pedal to the floor and allow Thanatos to continue smacking his enemies. Next up is the big boy Bloodforge for that spicy movement speed, the power, and the shield. If you're constantly getting kill resets, as you should on Thanatos, this means you're going to be cruising after your next target. It's going to give you an additional shield. It's going to protect you from all that damage that's going to come your way. And it is a great item for Thanatos. With this build, and even without the Brawlers, you're almost at the flat pen cap with the 2, so you are really slapping the carries late game. As for what to trade for the boots, I typically go Titan's Bane, as it's good for cleaning up the supports after the carries go down. If you get a pick on a support, it means your damage is going to be relevant to them. And it's pretty much a full damage build with a bunch of power and pen. But you do need to be careful about how you use it. At any point, you can sub some of these items out for Void Shields or Magi's Cloaks or even a Mantle if you feel like you need to be tanky or if you need to be the one starting the fights. The damage build is just more fun though. As for relics, blink and beads, absolutely no question. All right, guys, that does it for Thanatos. Let me know in the comment section what you think about guide number 2 and who should be next. Thanatos will always be an awesome god in my mind, and he's another fantastic pick for players who want to learn how to jungle. My personal philosophy is if you spend less time trying to learn the god, you spend more time trying to learn the role, and that's important, and Thanatos is great for that. I'll keep cranking these videos out as fast as I can, so be sure to subscribe and keep the bell on so you don't miss a video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.